Hi there, thank you for expressing your interest in watching this presentation in continuation from our poster. So myself, Phaedra Longhurst, and my colleague Lily Clark would like to present to you Health at Every Self, a not so neurotypical paradigm for eating disorders. We'll start off by defining the relationship between autism and eating disorders. Autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental disorder characterised by different social interaction and communication, restricted and repetitive behaviours and interests, and altered sensory processing. Furthermore, research has considered autism as a disorder of the self, giving different body sensory and cognitive behavioural processes. Research has also identified autistic traits as interrelated risk factors for eating disorder development and maintenance. Therefore, individuals with autism are found to present poorer and long-enduring outcomes. Eating disorders among autistic individuals are distinct from neurotypical populations in terms of its presentations and underlying mechanisms. Therefore, their unique needs do require adapting existing preventative and intervention methods. However, existing practice has been found stigmatising, non-inclusive and/or accessible, and infrequently ineffective. The Health at Every Size paradigm offers an alternative, holistic approach which advocates for diversity and honours and responds to the experiences of individuals across social identities. Specifically, it calls for the inclusion of all bodies and lived experiences and incorporates this into evidence for designing interventions, rejects the weight normative and/or weight loss approach of health, and promotes creating practices and environments which are both sustainable and inclusive. HAES has also presented a promising evidence base for eating disorder prevention and/or intervention by encouraging a critical perspective on existing treatment pathways. So evidence suggests that current normative eating disorder practice among neurodiverse populations have unintended consequences, such as being stigmatising, non-inclusive, inaccessible, due to being based upon an incomplete understanding and/or based upon assumptions. HAES does hold potential for addressing current limitations. However, its principles do require expanding its neurotypical perspective to include the neurodiverse experience. Therefore, this presentation critically evaluates current assumptions which underlie existing practice and highlight the ways in which it confounds the neurodiverse experience. We followed this by proposing adaptations to the existing HAES paradigm, Health at Every Self, as an inclusive conceptual framework. First, cognitive behavioural assumptions within current practice argues that to improve well-being, process-focused cognition, which informs moderating or adjusting behaviours, are required to reject weight-normative and/or diet-focused dialogue or practices. So individuals are encouraged to recognise internalised stigma, to relate to body blame and shame, and are encouraged to eat without external regulation, such as meal plans. Furthermore, maladaptive attitudes or behaviours such as disordered eating are developed or maintained by body or aesthetic-focused ideology, including attaining the thin ideal. However, this does assume a universal eating disorder ideology, despite being limited by not accounting for cognitive variances. So, neurodiverse cognition, such as weak central coherence and executive functioning, mediates a non-normative mechanism and presentation of eating disorder pathology, and therefore prevention and intervention methods. Assumptions based upon the body experience include weight-neutral and/or self-care behaviours, such as intuitive eating and life-enhancing movement, are connected to innate body sensory processes, such as interoception. Eating and movement should therefore be based upon internal rather than external regulation, so hunger cues rather than meal plans, as they potentially interfere with one's ability to adapt to their environment, specifically removing barriers to their bodily awareness, and therefore the promotion of positive effects. However, autistic individuals may lack sensitivity to bodily cues, impacting their ability for a normative healthy eating. So they may accidentally miss meals and therefore require food-specific regimes. Intuitive eating may alternatively consist of avoiding certain foods in order to manage their sensory difficulties, while intuitive movement may include autism-specific rationales such as stimming, so they may exhibit repetitive or compulsive movements, both of which are then assumed as eating disorder pathology in their rationale and presentation, so they're both ritualistic and at times compulsive. Eating disorder behaviours among neurodiverse groups are also developed and maintained without weight loss aesthetic-based ideology. Current practice further make social and cultural assumptions in that social and cultural meaning is shared on a universal level in terms of its understanding between the self and others. So individuals commonly blame and shame their bodies, specifically from an external standpoint, subsequent to wider cultural influences regarding appearance and or weight, which inherently perpetuates normative discontentment. Furthermore, they assume that behaviours which precipitate eating disorders are reduced through literacy and or raising awareness through public health messaging. However, cognitive and thinking variances among autistic individuals, such as theory of mind and executive function, alters their social communication and information processing, and therefore have differing capacities for sharing meaning and contextual understanding which are necessary for improving physical and psychological health. Specifically, it impacts their ability for social learning, which is a crucial process within literacy, preventative and interventional methods. So, for example, an autistic individual may exhibit rigid cognitive styles, which mediates difficulties in understanding social nuances and critically evaluating harmful messages. Finally, current practice make ecological assumptions. So individuals are trusted to move towards greater health, however, when given access and opportunity. So that is where information and health settings are deemed accessible, translatable and actionable. When experienced, individuals along the entire weight spectrum are then met with greater stigma-free and equitable care. However, within autism research, it is found that the environment modulates autistic cognitive compensation and therefore adaptive and maladaptive behaviour. Thus, the environment influences both positive and negative outcomes. For example, environments which contain demands for autistic abilities, such as containing or requiring social communication, may precipitate lower cognitive ability and, as a result, maladaptive behaviour, which impacts emotional, psychosocial and physical well-being. With current practice being predominantly set in normative environments, it therefore lacks accommodating for neurodiverse mechanisms and presentations, precipitating bias and is inherently pathologising. This in turn limits their ability to provide stigma-free and equitable care across the entire neurodiverse spectrum. So currently, the HAES principles refer to weight inclusivity, which is about accepting and respecting the diversity of body types and sizes. Health enhancement refers to policies that improve and equalise access to information and services. Eating for well-being refers to promoting flexible and individualised eating based on hunger, satiety, nutritional needs without external regulation. Respectful care acknowledges our biases in order to work to end weight discrimination, stigma and bias, and provide information and services from an understanding of socioeconomic status, race, gender and so forth. And life-enhancing movement, which supports physical activities that allow people of all sizes, abilities and interests to engage in enjoyable movement. We alternatively suggest the following. So instead, body inclusivity refers to accepting and respecting the diversity of both internal and external bodily experiences by acknowledging differences in processing abilities and reject normative biases regarding these. Health enhancement refers to equalising access to information and services by adapting practice according to variances in cognition and behaviour, including attention to environmental, sensory, and social or communication needs. Eating for well-being is about promoting eating which is congruent with the neurodiverse experience by accepting and accommodating for variances in nutritional needs and desires without inherently pathologising. Respectful care is about acknowledging our biases and end discrimination towards the neurodiverse community by addressing inequitable environments which are codified by the normative neurotypical experience. Finally, life-enhancing movement is about supporting physical activity and/or movement which differs in rationale and/or typical presentation, and ensures safe and non-judgmental spaces which promote healthy engagement and enjoyment. To conclude, the neurodiverse experience receives little theoretical consideration and remains an area of research that would benefit from future inquiry into theory and practice. Current clinical practices are limited in understanding and supporting eating disorders among the neurodiverse community. Consequently, neurodiverse populations present poorer outcomes subsequent to stigmatising, inaccessible and inequitable care. HAES does promote a diverse and inclusive healthcare, particularly in the sphere of eating disorder prevention and treatment. It is a well-established framework that may be well suited to enhance neurodiverse well-being as well as access to eating disorder support. However, it does require adaptation for better translation within this population. Our alternative framework of HAES is proposed as a conceptual step towards enhancing engagement with neurodiverse populations in a holistic rather than a pathologising manner. Thank you for listening. If you have any inquiries at all, please do not hesitate to get in touch with either myself, Phaedra, or my colleague Lily Clark via email or by Twitter. Thank you.